In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Do you remember at work when Alex and I used to try to figure out how to open bottles of wine if we didn't have a wine opener? And we would like do the thing where you would like put it in a shoe and then try to bang the shoe against the thing. And like one time I like came back to the office because we would always like find bottles of wine around the office. And I came back and there was like just cork everywhere because he had like scraped it out with scissors, just trying so desperately to open it. Like
I've been
these
in
are
that
just all the
position. I've done
it's just
I
all the
definitely done like a screw with like a hammer situation before.
ooh, okay, that makes sense. With like the back of the hammer and like a
Yeah, yeah, you just like
yeah,
screw it, it locks it, and then you pull up.
I get that.
Wait, people have no context on what we're talking about.
They all agree.
Welcome, welcome to Doom to Fail. We are joining you on a sunny Wednesday afternoon, or wherever you are. I'm Fars, joined here by Taylor. We are having some drinks. I'm drinking out of a child sippy cup that I acquired from an adult establishment. It is not a child sippy cup. It's not a strip club either. I don't know why I said it that way. It's just a restaurant that gives you little pink cups.
That's so funny. This is my sippy cup from a strip club.
There's a lot going on. Also, you'll notice that I'm hitting a vape pen because it makes me look young and cool.
Mm, I was thinking how cool you look. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me tell you this story. Speaking of cool people, I was at the airport the other day, and because we went to North Carolina, and we are at the airport in Las Vegas, and there was this couple who was so good looking. It was like good looking man, good looking woman, and they were wearing, well, they had no luggage, no purses, no bags. They just had the nicest sweatsuits I've ever seen with these like big cargo pockets, but they were like black and like thick sweatsuits and they were so nice. And then they were walking and the girl was holding two iPhones. He was holding one. And then she like went into her pocket and she dropped a vape pen and she picked it up and put it back in her pocket. So she had two phones and a vape pen. And then she went into another pocket and pulled out the biggest wad of cash I've ever seen in my life. And was just like counting cash. I was like, who are you guys? What is going on? You're so cool. What is this? Like you don't need anything on the plane except all your cash and your vape pen? Can you miss it on a plane? Why do you look so cool? What's happening? I felt very not cool because they were so cool.
I think you were. I think you might have come across me and Rachel.
No, mm-mm, mm-mm.
Fuck, they were cooler than that.
They were cooler than you, even cooler than you. You can believe it.
But look at this. Look how cute this is. Look
It
how
is, they
cute it
are cute.
looks.
It is cute.
Okay, so what happened, Taylor? I'll tell you the story. So 8 months ago, whatever it was, I went to Ireland and I was with Jeff Dunn and Dunn Vapes. And
Hmm.
so we went to some bar in Dublin and we're walking around. They had a vending machine. And the vending machine had elf bars, like little vape pen elf bars in there. And Dunn was like, oh my God, they have elf bars. And so he went to this vending machine, hit it like whatever it was, and it spit out an elf bar.
What's an
Anyways,
elf bar? I don't know what that
it's
means.
this. It's this. It's like this
Oh,
little.
okay.
It's there.
Because like the rectangle-ish one.
Yeah, the little rectangle vape pen things, and some whatever. Like we go to the wedding, and then he's going off with his wife somewhere. I'm like, I'm gonna go peel off and do my own thing. Somehow I ended up with the elf bar, and I went to Dublin. I was there for a couple of days, and I noticed that I started like when I would spit in the sink, it would be pink, and I was like, oh my God, my fucking
Oh,
mouth is bleeding,
I remember you talking about that.
right?
Yes.
And and it freaked me out, and I was like, it has to be the vape pen. And so I stopped. But whatever, for whatever reason, I packed the damn thing. Somehow it ended up underneath my bed at home.
Hmm.
And like 3 weeks ago, Rachel's like moving the bed and trying to clean it, and she finds a vape pen. And the thing, I started hitting it again. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this is kind of fun. And then it ran out. And then 2 days ago, I went out and bought this. My first vape pen I ever bought on my own. This one right here.
Are your gums bleeding again?
No, my gums, I just started doing it. So give me like a
Okay.
week and then we'll find out if it's going to start bleeding. Um,
Wait, so what's
but
in it?
I don't know, but I don't think it's good for me.
No, probably not.
Like nothing you can inhale this much, this easily can be good for you. But it makes you look young and it makes you look cool,
I mean, smoking makes you look so cool. So
right?
like, yeah, no, 100%. You look cooler when you're smoking. Everyone. Yes.
Everyone, kids, pick up a cigarette.
Dude, if I saw a kid smoking, I'd be like, that kid looks fucking
That
cool.
kid's fucking mouth. It's like,
I'd be
dude,
worried. It's bad, but I would be like, shit.
it's like somebody get this kid a fucking leather jacket and Harley Davidson. What are we doing? So we are on to the Fars side of our story time, and I have a whole fun little thing I'm going to talk about that I kind of touched on the last episode. So,
I'm excited.
uh,
Except, wait, should you give me hints? Do you think I could guess it?
oh,
Do you have like a signature
well,
drink? Do you have anything?
so I do have a signature drink. So the drink that I'm going to be drinking is something called Sujiangwa. Sujiangwa.
Great.
Sujiangwa. It is a Korean holiday drink that is non-alcoholic, and it is basically kind of like a punch, but it's like cinnamon and it's sweet, and it looks like very fun and sugary.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Fun.
it's not gonna give you any clues, but I thought it's the holiday season. A lot of people are gonna be in department stores, going to be in like malls, things of that nature, and so I'm kind of like being seasonal and touching on that. And I can tell you that this event took place in South Korea.
Okay.
That's all you know.
All right.
So I'm back on engineering disasters, and
Is this number
this
2?
this is like number 4.
Okay, we need to talk about that. Exactly what constitutes as the first 4.
Bhopal,
Okay.
Kansas City.
Oh, right. And roller coasters.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So I did notice, like I mentioned yesterday, that after the roller coaster episode, we had like the most downloads on that episode
Mm-hmm.
in like a month. And then the Napoleon one did like a tiny amount more downloads than that one did. And I was like, oh, so like folks are pretty into this stuff. I went further back and realized the last spike we had after Napoleon was Kansas City, the Kansas City Hyatt collapse. So
Mm.
so I'm starting to guess that folks are really into like engineering disasters, which is really fun because I actually love the topic. And like I love true crime and like all that. But like but most of it is like psychological, right? It's like getting into the heads of like, when you think about like kidnapping and raping like another person, like killing them,
Yeah.
like what, like how do you get to that point in your life, right? That's kind of the fascinating part of true crime for me. With engineering, it's a little bit scarier in some ways because
Mm-hmm.
it's like somebody did a thing or didn't do a thing, and then 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, you can be going about your happy life, doing whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is you do, and then
Mm-hmm.
holy shit, the floor crumbles underneath you and you fucking die. It's
You
like
know what?
scarier.
It's scarier. And you know what? Every once in a while in New York City, like a manhole explodes.
Right,
And I was like,
right.
Jesus fucking Christ. I walked over so many manholes and like someday they're gonna fucking explode. Yeah.
But like that shit happens all the time. So there was another situation I read about where like these two guys got into a fight. One of them like kicked the other guy. The guy fell down, and then somehow, some way, a fucking sinkhole develops underneath him, and the guy just falls 800 feet into a sink. It's like, what the fuck? Like, it's so
Mm-mm.
scary. It's like
Mm-hmm.
imagine, Taylor, I'm sitting here right now, and then like 50 years ago, someone did something 30 yards that way, and then it caused the hill that I'm on to fucking collapse as I'm sitting on it. Like, it's
Out of control.
terrifying.
Yeah.
So I actually love researching engineering disasters. I'm kind of getting the sense that y'all like to hear about them, so I might just keep going with this topic, but we'll see. TBD. Like I mentioned in the beginning, uh, it is a holiday season. People are going to be in stores. I wanted to do something that kind of touched on that, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Today, I'm going to be touching on a store that existed in the bustling, lovely, stunning city of Seoul, South Korea. You'll notice I use the past tense existed because the store no longer exists. If you want to avoid a disaster in a department store this holiday season, stay tuned for our sponsor.
This week's episode of Doomed to Fail is brought to you by Naughty Studio. Are you looking for some holiday merch for a friend's gift exchange? A fun gift for a sibling Secret Santa? Check out the collection of inappropriate holiday sweaters and gifts from Naughty Studio. We definitely don't recommend them for a work party, but we do recommend them for a family party where you'd like to make someone uncomfortable and also take a few minutes to yell about free speech, because this is America. Find Naughty Studio, that's Nautee Studio, on Instagram and Etsy. Use the promo code Let's Do This for 15% off your order. That's Naughty Studio. We'll put the link in our show notes. And happy holidays from us. Thanks.
And the name of the store is the Sampoong Department Store.
Okay.
So I'm going to do this in 3 acts. We're going to go into the background, the accident itself, and then how it happened.
Okay.
So act 1, the background. We're going to start with Seoul itself. So Seoul's history is fucking insane. Like, what a haunted, tortured city. Like, this thing has been shelled into oblivion by like every country in and around the Korean peninsula. At one point, it was actually taken over 100% by North Korea and then artilleried into non-existence until it was taken back. Like, there's a lot going on there. But long story short is that it is so South Korea. It's on the Korean peninsula. The southern part of it is South Korea. The northern part of it that touches China is North Korea, and Seoul sits on the northwesternest. Or sorry, yeah, is that right? Yeah, it's the northwesternest part of the Korean peninsula. So it's very, very close to North Korea. It's actually only 30 miles. It is 30 miles from Seoul to the demilitarized zone. And by the way, it's one of the most bustling cities ever. It is the 4th largest city by population of any metropolitan area. It's fucking huge.
Whoa.
And it's gorgeous. Like, if you look up pictures of it, I was like, this is LA. Like, the downtown, there's a picture of downtown LA with the mountains behind it, and you're like, wow, this looks absolutely stunning. There's tons of those in North Korea, or South Korea and Seoul. Like, it is a beautiful, bustling, lively, active city with a ton of history behind it. There's a picture I saw that I think people have seen before that's really stunning, but it like shows you what kind of a country South Korea is. It's at night. It was taken by the International Space Station, and it shows South Korea and China at night from space. And you're like, there's an ocean between them. You're like, there isn't. That's North Korea. It is just like a dead zone. It is so sad. I mean, it's sad. Like, I mean, it's really fucking sad. Like,
Crazy.
when you look at like what Seoul looks like and what South Korea in general looks like, and you're like, holy shit! Like, these people are like the hardest working, most industrious, smartest, most like, it's just like, and then like you look 30 miles above it, and you're like, what the fuck happened? Like, it's just crazy.
It's crazy to me that, I mean, I think we talked about this before, but like that something's happening in North Korea and we don't know. And I think
Yeah.
people there don't know. And like I watched this one documentary where a doctor, because like doctors from the rest of the world will go there to try to help people. And there was one that did like cataract surgery and like made a whole bunch of people be able to see again. It's like a very simple surgery that like they can do everywhere else in the world. And they would do it, and these people would do it, and they'd be able to see again. And they would go run up to a picture of the leader and be like, "Thank you, Supreme Leader, for this
So
blessing of being able to
crazy.
do this." And you're like, you could have just had this if you lived anywhere else."
So
Anyway.
wild. Yeah. So, but like, that's kind of the backdrop on what this event is that we're going to be talking about. It's that you have a country like South Korea where it has been a fucking war. It was Japanese occupied. Then it went through the Korean War. It was fucking shelled. It was battered into non-existence. It rebuilt itself.
Mm-hmm.
Some of your volcano conversation, where in the 60s and 70s, basically like development started ramping fairly significantly because the 1950s was the Korean War. That's when basically there was no South Korea, or there was no Seoul. And then all of a sudden, they come out of that, and then they start doing economic revitalization, rapidly building and expanding the city. In 1988, Seoul was awarded the Olympic Games, and in the lead up to this, there was a massive fucking expansion and blow up of construction because there was nothing there after the war, and so they started building because of the war. But beyond that, the Olympics obviously caused them to exceed even their standard goals of building. So that's kind of the backdrop that the story falls into. Is you have a country that is basically pushed to its very limits in
Mm-hmm.
terms of capacity to build, with an absolute need to build, and where that happens, shit goes wrong, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1987, there was a company called the Sampoong Group who decided to build an apartment complex in the Gangnam region of Seoul. It's
Mm-hmm.
predominantly known as being one of the wealthiest parts of the country. It has been likened to Beverly Hills
Mm-hmm.
and things of that nature. So for example, Samsung's headquarters is based in the Gangnam region. Hyundai's
Mm-hmm.
headquarters are based in the Gangnam region, and then all the other now massive conglomerates that supply those companies is also headquartered there. So that's what we're talking about. At the time, the Sampoong Group, they owned what was previously a landfill, essentially, in that area. And what they thought was, let's capitalize on the increased property values. We'll build an apartment building in this area, make a shitload of money. There's not any affordable housing here anyway, so whatever. So they retained this firm called Woo-Sang Construction to build it.
Mm-hmm.
This is like so typical. Like it reminds me of every startup I've ever been at. So halfway through the construction project, a new chairman of this group was installed. This guy's name was
Mm-hmm.
Lee Joon, and I'm going to be talking about him quite a bit later on. And this is the part that's like very typical. It's like when a new leader comes in and they fucking don't know shit, but they feel like they know shit, and they start making changes and flip, like just sketching stuff out. And it's just like, leave it alone, man. Like you
It's
really
the
had no place.
worst.
And
The
why is it
worst.
so common?
It's
It's
always
so
awful. You're like,
common.
he's like, oh, I know all these things. And you're like, we've been doing this for like 10 years. Like, can you just like, listen to us? And they're like, no, I know all these things.
Like leave me the fuck. Like it's so typical. It's so
Always.
this guy comes in. This building that they contracted with Woosung had already been half built, and he decided again, no context, no background in
Ugh.
construction or anything. He decides, fuck it, I don't want an apartment building, I want a department store.
I have a question
So,
for you, Fars. Wait,
yes,
if I'm moving into a new building, is there a way to see who built it and if they are qualified?
I mean, you probably have to go to the city because there's permits that were filed.
I
That's
feel like there
probably your
should be
only
an
option.
alert that's like, this building was built by a guy who just wanted to build a big building.
Should we like start a startup that like just makes it easy to pull permits?
Yes. Like we go in an elevator and it says like go to the front desk for the elevator thing, and I'm like, fuck you, I know it's not there.
Yeah, that guy's not gonna know. Fucking like Larry hanging out,
Yeah,
vaping,
absolutely not.
looking cool.
Yeah, no.
So, so this guy says halfway through the project, we're gonna build a department building. Fuck this apartment idea, it's not gonna work. So, doing that means installing one additional floor, installing elevators, and most importantly, cutting into major support columns so they can increase the retail space inside this building.
Can I tell you
So,
something else?
yes.
I'm gonna interrupt you every single 5 seconds because I have a lot to say about this. So when I was in college, I lived in a dorm that was like a 30-story building. Like was like it's now it's apartments. I lived on the ninth floor, but all of the rooms had weird like beams that kind of would like go through the wall. So it kind of be like a shelf on your wall, like a beam that came out and like across it, because it used to be an office building. And was an office building, it was fine. But when it turned into apartments, it swayed too much for apartments because like office buildings sway so they don't fall over, but it was too much sway for apartments. In the middle of the night, you'd be like, no, no, no. So they had to add more support.
That's actually gonna come up here in a minute.
Okay, great.
So, yes, please do like stop me, interject. So the idea was that with an apartment building, you can basically install support structures almost anywhere you want. Because look, I'm in a room right now. You're in a room. We're all in a room. Like you could put a support beam over there. I want to fucking know. You put it over there, there. Like it's like you're surrounded by walls, and you can
Mhm.
hide supporting structures within walls. That's different in a retail space or a warehouse
Mhm.
because it is the function depends on the ability to access wide open spaces. You can't just stack them with support beams. So that's a key difference in the architecture of a apartment building, a hotel, whatever, and a warehouse, so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
knowing that this guy Lee wanted to change the structure of this half-built building halfway through, Woo-sung, the firm they hired to do the building, they bowed out. They said they're uncomfortable with the changes. I'm not going to do this, and they were like, they paid whatever fines they had to pay for bowing out of the contract and breaking their contract. And Lee Joon, the chairman that was recently assaulted, said, "Fuck it." There was also a construction business as part of Sampoong Group, and he was like, "We'll
Hmm.
just utilize our own firm," which again he just took over as chairman to finish this project. So picture wise, it looks like any other big box store. It's
Hmm.
painted bright pink for some reason, so it looks a little bit weird and like off putting. The key is that there is a north and south wing, and those seem like pretty critical structural components to the building.
Hmm.
And then there's a middle section, and that's kind of like the shopping area. Like the way I would, it's weird. Like when I first saw it, I was like, this looks like Caesar's Palace. Like it looks like the old original Caesar's Palace, where it's like it has these
Hmm.
tall towers, then like the units are kind of in between. That's kind of the setup of it. So typically in buildings like this, the construction type is to use a steel skeletal structure. It's
Hmm.
how every modern retail space operates. It's how every retail space, it's how every warehouse, and it's how every skyscraper is built. Because steel can flex, it can move. And that
Hmm.
is critical when you're dealing with a shitload of weight and a ton of levels above you.
Hmm.
In this case, Lee Joon's construction firm decided to use what's called a flat slab construction, which means a slab of concrete that makes up the floors, and then there's
Hmm.
support columns in between them. And they're usually spaced out, in this case, about 36 feet apart from each other. So a ton of
Okay.
little things in between. But what that essentially also means is that the top floor was responsible for supporting its weight, but the floor below was responsible for supporting its weight, plus the top floor, the one below that, supported all three, and so on and so forth. Make
I feel like
sense?
this reminds me of the Kansas City collapse because it's like you're counting on the thing above you to like do more work than it should do or whatever, you know?
The amount of work that this thing was designed to do, it would have done if it was constructed the way it was designed to do.
Hmm. Ugh.
That's not what happened. So, the building was completed and opened to the public in July 7th of 1990. So the events we're going to discuss happened 5 years after the building was built. So the building stood for 5 years. So let's go into the accident itself. So in April of 1995, the first signs kind of started arising when employees started noticing cracks on the fifth floor, which is the top floor. The thing was the thing was designed to be 4 floors tall. They decided later, again, halfway through construction, they're going to add a fifth floor, and the fifth floor would be a food court. And it's on this floor that they started noticing cracks and buckling happening on the floor that connects the slab to the columns.
Hmm.
It's also worth noting that the air conditioning unit for the entire building was on top of the fifth floor, sitting on top of the roof. So a month later in June, the number of cracks increased in this area on the fifth floor to the point where the management closed the top floor down and they brought in a civil engineering firm to inspect it. And the civil engineering firm was basically like, very simply, yeah, not good. This thing's gonna
Now that
collapse.
that sounds very smart.
Yeah,
Bring in engineers and
like
have them tell you what to do.
it's like I can barely color between lines on a coloring book, and I could tell you this building's going to collapse. Is basically how the engineers framed it. So the store's leadership called an emergency meeting, and they were trying to figure out what to do. And everyone was of the opinion of, hey, we should evacuate this building and hire a firm to come in and try and fix this up. That's the only thing to do. And Lee was the boss, and he goes, no, I'm not going to close the building down because if we do that, we're going to lose tons of revenue for sales that day. And I'm like, later on, I was like, what on earth could his logic have been? Are we just going to keep this open in perpetuity, knowing full well we're gonna, like this thing is going to collapse? Like, I didn't understand what his thought process was. He sounds like a He sounds like a guy who probably shouldn't have been in leadership. On June 29th at 5:52 p.m., the building started producing a cracking sound, and store employees, against the wishes of management, sounded an alarm and instructed everybody to get the fuck out of the building.
Fuck yeah, good job. That's don't worry about your job. Save your
Don't worry
life.
about your job. Save your life. Yeah,
Fuck
yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
It's like the 9/11 thing. Didn't you say like people were like, "I'm gonna listen to my boss. My boss is telling me to go upstairs and like stand there and wait."
100%. Because you get you, and I feel like I would have done the same thing. You'd be like worried, what's happening. You look to this boss who has no idea. Like your boss at your hedge fund or at your like Macy's isn't a civil engineer, Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, so here's the problem. The
Oh my
problem
God.
is that with a structural issue like this, it has a compounding domino effect. Every failure compounds the next failure two times. So by the time
Hmm.
you can notice something going on, it is booked. Like there is no coming
Hmm.
back. So at this point, it was way too late. What ended up happening was the air conditioning unit on the top floor, which is the fifth floor,
Hmm.
it caved into the fifth floor, which then caved into the fourth, the third, so on, all the way down to two sub basements.
Oh my God.
Around 2,000 people were inside when this happened, except for Lee, the
Of course
chairman,
not.
who like evacuated himself, but left his like he left his son-in-law inside. So,
Oh, well, it says a lot
so
about how I felt about his son-in-law.
yeah, exactly. And so he managed to evacuate, but in total, of the 2,000 people that were inside the building, 502 people were basically killed instantly.
Mm.
And then 1,500 were trapped in the rubble. And if you look at pictures of this, what you'll see is a north and south wing, like I mentioned earlier. They're still standing, and the entire center is completely caved in.
Mm.
So that look, it's good that it didn't collapse, but it kind of fucked over the rescue, the fact that those two didn't collapse, because the city was like, these two towers that are not meant to stand on their own are now standing here. We can't send people into this thing because they're gonna collapse on top of them.
Because these things sometimes like they don't all collapse. It's like part of it collapses, So there's like that line where you could be like standing there and be like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Just in front of me, there's nothing all of a sudden. Like open a door and there's nothing all of a sudden.
that was also a horror movie. What was that horror movie where like it was a day after tomorrow or something? No, I don't remember.
It happened in San Andreas, I remember, but like,
Yes,
yes.
yes,
And
it was San Andreas.
they're at that
Where,
restaurant in LA and they open the door and then there's nothing there.
thank you, Taylor. You were see, this is why we're friends.
I've already told you that my mom says that she's watched San Andreas a bunch because she really likes it. And I was like, that's crazy. And also good for you.
Yeah, great for her. That's a fucking awesome movie. So, long
Oh
story
my
short, was
God.
that basically this rescue operation held still. It didn't move at all because what they were trying to do was tie these guide wires to the structure that was still standing, so they could retain it in place, so it didn't collapse onto rescuers. So that's what they did. And once
Mm.
they achieved that, basically rescuers went in, and out of the 1,500 people that were assumed stuck inside, about 150 people were dragged out still alive, except obviously really, really badly wounded. I did
Oh my
read that
God.
they ended up rescuing one person who managed to survive up to 14 or 17 days. Yeah, insane. So
17 days? Oh
days.
my God, I
So
hate
one thing
days.
that's crazy that is like another direct parallel to the Kansas City thing was that after this thing collapsed, obviously all water and sewer lines are collapsed in as well. And so people who were
Hmm.
alive mentioned that like, yeah, there was a lot of people around me and they all just fucking drowned because they're all pinned underneath concrete blocks and the water's rising because this thing's getting flooded and they just drowned. Kind of crazy. Yeah. So 2 weeks is what their cutoff was. So after 2 weeks, they were like, anybody that's inside this thing is probably dead. Obviously, one person wasn't, probably more, but like one person for sure wasn't. They rescued that person. And so they decided after this period of time, we're going to convert this into a rescue operation. So they ended up doing
Hmm.
that and then clearing out the space. Obviously, nobody was happy with Lee. Lee was kind of a pig in shit in this situation. And he was dragged into court. And it was like one thing that was like incredible was he kept talking about like how much this disaster impacted him financially. And
Oh, fuck
people
you.
like, there's like you killed like a small village worth of people with your
Oh my
neglect.
God.
And so he ended up getting 10 and a half years in prison. His son, Lee's son, was also the CEO of the store itself, that entity, the Sampoong
Did
Department Store
did his
entity.
son-in-law die?
His son-in-law did die. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
on purpose.
He got his son out though.
Yeah,
He
uh-huh.
he got the CEO
So
out.
very suspicious.
Um, and so his son ended up getting 7 years in prison. It's great to know that Lee got out of jail and was like maybe alive for like 2 years before he died. Like that's like all he's known for is like being responsible for this. There was a city administrator who was responsible for certifying the safety of the building who accepted a bribe from Lee.
Oh my
He ended up
God.
getting 3 years in prison for bribery. Three
Should be more.
years. Three
Should be more.
years.
Should be forever.
Fucking insane. It should be fucking
Unbelievable.
forever.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And then the families themselves ended up getting about $360,000 each. That came out of the budget from the city of Seoul itself, as well as Lee's and his family's personal wealth. So yeah, and today what stands on top of this haunted fucking landscape is a luxury apartment building, which is like
Oh
horrific,
no.
horrific to think about.
Oh no, there's lots of ghosts in that building.
So Act Three is what ended up happening. So the design of the building was so the design of the building was fine. What they did with that design was all bad. So,
Okay.
like I said, the application of this building was never meant to hold a wide open space. It was
Right.
meant to be an apartment. And what was
Right.
clear is that what ended up happening to this building is what is referred to as a punching shear. So what this is essentially when the okay, so you look at a floor. I'm holding my hands up, and this is for the benefit of Taylor, nobody that's actually listening. So you have a
See.
floor,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have poles that or whatever. You have like columns that run through the center of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that like the columns are holding the weight of that floor.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, there can be a situation where the pressure, weight, and force on that concrete slab is enough to punch through the column underneath it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what ended up happening here. But why would something like this happen? So again, they basically did everything wrong and on the cheap side in the interest of what Lee wanted to do from an economic perspective. So for one, the columns that supported the floors legally were supposed to be 31 inches thick. The thicker they are, the more weight they can bear, all that. In this case, they were reduced to 24 inches thick, and the reason was to increase floor space for retail sales. The other problem was there was a misalignment of the columns on a floor-to-floor level. So basically what it means is that you don't have one column that goes all the way to the top. You have a column that goes up 2 floors, then it breaks, and then there's another column in 404 to 5, so on and so forth, which
Mm-hmm.
means that you can't count on the columns underneath you to help support your weight because they're not there. The other thing is the slabs that the floors are made of themselves. So we heard a lot about this during the Titan submersible disaster, which was like the thing that was made out of carbon fiber. Everybody kept talking about how carbon fiber is incredibly strong under tensile strength, or yeah, it's incredibly
Like the
strong under
pressure, yeah.
tensile strength, but under compression, it's weak. That's what happens with concrete. Like obviously, you can't bend a piece of concrete. Like you only break a piece of concrete. You can't bend
Right,
it.
right, right. It's not like a yes, I totally
Yeah.
understand.
And so what engineers do is they insert rebar, which is steel reinforced barbing,
Mm-hmm.
into concrete so that it gives it the tensile flexibility so it can flex a little bit without breaking.
Got
That's the
it.
idea of rebar. In this case, each slab was supposed to hold 16 pieces of rebar, and it didn't. Each slab held half that. It held 8 pieces of rebar. So that was not good either, which means that it didn't have enough of the tensile strength to not break under any weight, pressure, force, or what have you. The last issue was weight. So basically, the building was never designed with a fifth floor. The guy decided to add a fifth floor because he wanted a restaurant on top of his building, and so he added a restaurant. And
Hmm.
on top of that restaurant, he added what was, or not on top of it, but in the flooring of that restaurant, he inserted this hosing, like this copper hosing that
Hmm.
circulates water. The reason was that at least at this time, I don't know if it's still common, but in South Korea, the custom is you eat on the floor. Like you sit on the floor, you sit down, you eat there.
Sure.
And he wanted the floor to be warm so people feel comfortable.
Oh.
So now you have all the weight of so they increased the thickness of the concrete on the fifth floor that was never designed to exist. And then they started running tubing through it along with water. So it increased the weight dramatically. The other thing was the air conditioning. So it's called a 15-ton unit, which apparently isn't the actual weight of the unit itself. The actual weight of the unit itself was 50 tons. I think that has to do with the capacity it has,
Yeah,
50
yeah,
tons, whatever it is. So this was installed on the roof. What was problematic about what they did here? So first off, it was obvious that when this thing kicked on, it was causing issues anyways. It was the source of a lot of the fractures of the column on the fifth floor. But the bigger problem was everybody complained about it. The neighbors complained about this thing. And so the management, instead of doing what you should have done, which is airlift or crane this thing into a new spot, they
yeah. Hmm.
rolled it across the ceiling, which applied the
Oh.
maximum weight across all the other columns, causing one of them to crack severely. And
Is
then
that what started it? Like officially?
officially, what they think started it is that every single time, this was like a known thing with the store employees, was when they kickstarted this thing, anytime it turned on, because every time an air conditioning unit starts on, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
poof, poof, it like
Hmm.
does a thing. They noticed that like there was like a 3.5 inch gap that was forming in the columns around the air conditioning unit.
Oh my
So their
gosh.
suspicion was when this thing turns on, it is quaking this entire building. And so that
Yeah.
is the assumption. The assumption is
Um,
this thing kicked on and it already shattered and fractured these columns to the extent that like they were no longer supportive. And
hmm.
so they caved, so the air conditioning caved, and all of a sudden you have 50 tons hitting the floor
Oh my
at
God.
velocity, and it just started pancaking everything all the way down. So that was basically how it all ended up coming down. Like I said, ultimately, everybody went to jail. Like everybody went to jail. What's funny is they said that the building, if it had been built as designed, would have been 2.5 times stronger than it needed to be to basically stand. Um, all the other little changes they did. So, for example, to install elevators or escalators, not elevators, to install escalators, they had to cut into the supporting structures in the middle of the building. Like all the
Hmm.
stuff they did in the interest of making it a retail space, ultimately is what caused it to pancake onto the ground. Which is sad.
Jesus.
So, yeah, have fun shopping.
Do you think that people who like do those original plans add on all those things to make it so much stronger because they know people are gonna fuck it up?
I don't know. I think everybody's just looking after their own ass. Like one thing that we learned from the Regency Hyatt disaster is that you in these situations, in a lot of situations, like here, like Taylor, with our jobs, like if we fuck up, a company might lose some money,
Right, who
somebody might get
cares?
fired. Like who gives a fuck? These guys have a different level of like liability. Like
Hmm.
they are criminally liable. I mean, this guy, the son, was held, went to jail for criminal homicide or negligent
Hmm.
homicide, whatever it was. Like it is a different standard. And so my assumption is that they overbuild these things because like I so don't want to get sodomized in a prison. Like you know what I mean? Like that's probably like what they're mostly thinking. That's what I would
Yeah,
be thinking.
no, totally. And that, but, and I think that then also they have the assumption that like someone's gonna mess it up.
Or that, yeah, that too. But like in this case, so the builder in this case said, "Fuck it, I'm not going to build this to your spec. I'll build it to the spec that it was designed, but I'm not going to build it to your new spec." So Woo-sung was the original builder, so they're like, "Fuck this! This guy's going. He's trying to tell me to like cut into like architectural supports." Dude, the fact that this thing stood for 5 years is incredible. Like,
Hmm.
so yeah, it was all bad. It was all bad. It was really sad. It's actually the second biggest the second biggest accidental collapse of a building in world history. There's one more that's bigger, and that is in Bangladesh, but info on it was like it's Bangladesh, so it's kind of hard to come by. But
Mm-hmm.
I might try and dig deeper into that one at some later date. So
Yeah,
uh,
these are so scary. I love them.
yeah, because you're not doing anything wrong, you
Yeah, you're
know?
just like at the store, you're just like whatever, or like you have your job at the Macy's and like you're just whatever, and you're like something's weird, but you don't say anything because you just trust that where you are is safe,
You,
don't you?
so last night, for reasons that are probably stupid, we ended up deciding that we're gonna go out on Sixth Street, and I fucking hate going out on Sixth Street because I'm nearly 40 years old. I'm not 21, and it's just full of like 20-year-olds that are shit fuck wasted and doing stupid things. And we go, whatever. It was a good time. It was whatever, and we came home, and then I remember thinking to myself, I was like, this is like outside of my risk profile. Like I'm not someone that's like I'm gonna go out drinking on a busy street with a bunch of college. Like it's just like so many
Mm-hmm.
things can go wrong. I mean, you're dealing with like 22-year-olds who are trying to get laid and meet people. Like it's just like this is not my scene. What's funny is not funny, but like about an hour and a half after I left, there was a shooting a block from where I was.
This weekend?
Yeah.
It's happening
So
all the fucking time in Austin.
So somebody was like waving a gun around or doing something. Cops showed up, shot the person in the head, and then somehow, either through the victim or the guy who started the whatever, somebody ended up shooting three people on accident. Um,
On
and
accident? What does that even mean?
I think it might have been the cops. It might have been the cops who accidentally fired into the crowd.
What? You don't accidentally fire into a crowd.
I mean, it's Sixth Street, so it's pretty busy. But yeah, so like,
No.
so, but like, it made me think. I was like, that's a situation where like I knew I was taking on a new risk profile. But if you were like, far as we should go get something for our parents, let's go to the
Yeah.
store. I'd be like, there's no risk. Like, what the fuck could possibly go
Well,
wrong?
I mean, like, remember the other day when we were at the Biltmore and we were going to that winery and we heard gunshots?
Oh yeah, that was fun.
And you were like, what if I just got shot in the head right now? I'd be like, and I was like, I'd be like Jackie Kennedy because I would get your brains in my hand. But also, that's very serious. Like, someone could have been shooting us from the parking lot because, man, that's crazy. Austin, that's scary.
So wild. Yeah, it was like an hour after we left. There was a fucking shooting. It was literally a
Yikes.
block away. Like we were like
I'm
at the
so
bar. There was
sorry.
a block away. And I was like,
That's
wow,
awful.
all right, well that's life then. But like that's the part of the engineering stuff that freaks me out. It's like there's no risk. There
Nothing you
should be
could
no
do.
risk. Yeah, it's like what can
Hmm.
you do? Like if I go to my local grocery store and the fucking roof collapses on me while I'm trying to buy some pimento cheese, which I love pimento cheese, but like if I'm trying to buy pimento cheese,
Yeah.
it's delicious.
No offense.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's crazy.
So we learned about punching shears. We learned about weight loads. We learned that vaping makes you look cool and young. I look
Hmm.
16 again.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just where we're gonna leave it.
That's terrible, but super interesting. I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it's a gross, awful, but also interesting one. Man, I want to go to Seoul so bad. It
I
looks
know, it looks
fucking
cool.
incredible. It looks so, like what an awesome like culture and people. The whole thing is like amazing.
Yeah, it looks cool.
So,
Uh,
um, sweet.
Let us know
That's
if
all I
you've been
got.
there. Yeah, thank you.
Let us
Thank
know if
you.
you've been there. Hey, also let us know if like you like the engineering stuff because like
Yeah. What do you want to
again,
hear,
I
people?
I like I get burned out on like the true crime stuff because it's like I can only talk about someone fucking a dead corpse so many times in my life.
Mm.
Eventually, I want to move on to like other things and like the engineering stuff is like really interesting. 'Cause you learn about like how
Hmm.
things kind of come together and like the science behind it and like I don't know. There's a lot of fun stuff there. So if you like it, let us know. How do they let
Yeah,
us
let
know,
us know.
Taylor?
DoomedToFailPod@gmail.com.
DoomedToFailPod@gmail.com.
And at all the socials, DoomedToFailPod. We'll
Finger
see you there.
guns.
Tell your
Sweet.
friends.
Tell
Give
your
us five
friends.
stars. Five
Tell your
stars.
friends. Tell
Apple
your
Podcasts.
families. Write to us. Let us know what you think. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks, Faris.
I'm going to close it out and.